What's going on, everybody? My name is Ronnie DiMaggio, product specialist here at BMW Morristown. That's Austin behind the camera, and in today's video we are not just going to be talking about this M8 Competition coupe. Instead, we're going to be talking about the M8. We're also going to talk about this M5 non-competition. We're going to talk about this M4 competition, and we're also going to talk about this M3 non-competition. So, as cool as these cars might look lined up next to each other, and they do look really cool lined up next to each other, we didn't just get them all up here just to show you guys how cool they look. Instead, we're going to be doing a breakdown on the engines in each one of these cars. So, amongst these four cars, we have every M engine currently offered for sale in the BMW lineup. We have the S58 in the two cars on your left, the M3 and the M4, and we have the S63 on the two cars on your right, the M5 and the M8. In addition to just having every engine, we also have every state of tune. So we have the base S58, we have the Competition S58, we have the base S63, and we have the Competition S63. So every engine, every state of tune. We're going to talk about what the differences between the engines are, as well as what the differences in the states of tune are. So we're going to start over here on the left with the least powerful car here. That is the M3 Base. So let's go ahead and pop the hood and talk about this S58 in base trim. All right, so here we are under the hood of the first of the four M cars that we're going to be talking about today. This car that I'm standing next to is an M3 Base, so it is not the competition trim. That means that it makes 473 horsepower, 406 pound-feet of torque. It also means that it's a manual transmission, which is pretty cool. So this is the S58 based on BMW's B58. The B58 is the series engine that we put in all of our inline six cars, X5, X6, X7, 540, M340, all those cars get the B58. It is only the M3, M4, X3M, and X4M that get the S58. That S designation means that it is an M-specific engine. It is an engine designed by BMW M for use in BMW M vehicles. So let's go over some of the quick specs on the S58. So it has a displacement of 2,993 cc's. We can round that up to 3 liters. It has a compression ratio of 9.3 to 1. Like I said, 473 horsepower at 6,250 RPMs for the base car, and 406 pound-feet of torque that comes on peak at 2,650 RPMs. So those are the quick specs on the S63. I also want to note, and I think this is important, that it is an undersquare design. It has a bore of 84 millimeters and a piston stroke of 90 millimeters. So what that means is the bore, the actual size of the hole in the engine block that the piston moves in, or the cylinder, is 84 millimeters wide. The stroke, the distance that the piston moves, is 90 millimeters. So the stroke is larger than the bore, which means we would call it an undersquare design. A square design would be the bore and the stroke are equal, and an oversquare design would mean that the bore is larger than the stroke. So what are the differences? Well, an undersquare engine like this S58 will make more torque, but it won't rev as high as an oversquare engine. On the flip side, an oversquare engine will rev higher, but not make as much torque as an equivalent undersquare engine. So to give you guys a super scientific and technical breakdown, visual representation of what that looks like, if you watch my hand and pretend that it's a piston, right now I am an oversquare engine. I'm moving really fast, but I'm not moving a lot. Now I'm an undersquare engine. I'm moving a lot, big range of motion, but I'm not moving very fast. In an undersquare engine, if this was an engine, I'm generating more force when I move more in a larger range of motion. Going like this, I move really fast, I make a lot of horsepower, but I don't generate a lot of force. Generating more force like this is where you get the torque, the increased torque in the undersquare designs as opposed to the oversquare design. So kind of a silly visual representation, but hopefully it kind of helps you guys understand the difference between under and oversquare, because I do think it's important. I think that that is a big part of the engine's architecture, and it contributes pretty significantly to the way the engine performs on the road. But that's going to do it for our base S58. We'll close up the hood on the M3. We'll take a short walk over to the M4 Competition. Now, we don't really need to pop the hood because visually they are going to be identical, the non-comp and the comp. However, you guys want something to look at, so we'll give you something to look at. There you go. This is the competition version of the S58. So That means that it does make a little bit more torque than the non-competition version, as well as more horsepower. This car makes 503 horsepower as opposed to the base's 473, and it makes 479 pound-feet of torque as opposed to the base car's 406 pound-feet of torque. So the horsepower comes on at peak at the same RPM, 6250. However, the torque comes on very slightly later, 100 RPMs later, at 2750. So you might be wondering, where does the extra power come from? Well, just like if you wanted to add extra power to your car, you turn up the boost a little bit. BMW did the same thing. So we cranked the boost up to 24 pounds in the competition car as opposed to 18 pounds in the base car. So about 6 more pounds of boost gives you about 30 more horsepower and about 70 more pound-feet of torque. That is the only difference engine-wise between the comp and the base. So hardware-wise, they are the same. They share the same pistons, rods, crankshaft, same cylinder head, same valve train, same everything. It's all identical except for the engine tuning, of course. That is where the extra power comes from. It is more boost, but obviously BMW's M Engine engineers adjust the fuel trims, adjust the ignition timing to make sure that the car can handle the extra boost and maintain that drivability that you would expect from a BMW. So architecturally, they are identical. However, software-wise, makes a little more power in the comp. That's going to do it for our two S58s. We have the base car and the competition car. Let's move on to our V8s, the S63 in the base M5 and the M8 competition. All right, so here we are under the hood of the M5 non-competition. So the M5 uses a 4.4 liter twin turbocharged V8. It is called the S63. And just like the S58 is based on the B58, the S63 is based on the N63. That is the series V8 that's used in the X5 M50, the M550, the 750i, so on and so forth. However, the M5 gets the S63. So some quick specs. In non-comp trim, it makes 600 horsepower, 553 pound-feet of torque. It has a compression ratio of 10:1. It displaces 4,395 cc's of displacement. So again, not quite 4.4 liters, but we round up. It makes its peak power at 5,690 RPMs, and the torque comes on nice and low at 1,800 RPMs. Now, something interesting about the S63 as opposed to the S58 is that the bore is 89 millimeters and the stroke is 88.3. So it is very nearly a square setup. However, it's actually over square, which is obviously in contention with the S58's under square design. So in theory, you would say that the over square design revs a little bit higher. It doesn't make quite as much torque. BMW has tuned it in a way that kind of negates that. And, you know, if we don't want to split hairs, it's pretty much a square engine. It's 0.7 of a millimeter that makes it over square, so pretty much a square engine design. Another interesting thing about the S63 is that it is a hot V layout, so you can see coming from our air coolers, the intake pipes go right into the V of the engine. That is where the turbochargers are tucked away. If we pop this cover up, you can see the turbos clear as day right under there, and these pipes bring in cold air into the turbochargers. They compress the air, shove it into the cylinders, and make a lot of horsepower. So that is the base S63. Now, let's take a look at the competition S63 in the M8 competition. So the difference between the base S63 and the comp S63 is very similar to the base S58 and the comp S58. Makes a little bit more power, 617 as opposed to 600. Torque remains the same, however, at 553. It all, of course, uses the same engine architecture, same bore and stroke, the same compression ratio, all that good stuff remains the same. The competition version does make its peak horsepower at peak torque, I should say, at slightly higher of an RPM. Other than that, they are largely the same, just about a 17 horsepower bump in the comp versus the non-comp. Again, that comes from extra boost. I don't have the exact number from BMW on how much boost. You guys can probably Google around and find that out yourself, but I don't want to say any numbers that don't come from BMW, so I don't want to be wrong. but it is a little bit extra boost and some other engine software changes to generate another 16 horsepower. But that is going to do it for the S63 Base versus S63 Comp, as well as the S58 discussion. Now, video's not quite over because this wouldn't really be an engine breakdown video if we didn't let the engines speak for themselves. So I'm going to stop doing some talking and I'm going to let these engines sing a little song for you guys. So we'll start with the M3 on the left and we'll get you some rev clips from the M3 to the M4 to the M5 to the M8. We will close out on that, so I'm going to finish up, let you guys hear the cars, but I just want to remind you guys to subscribe to the channel, like the video, drop a comment, follow us on social media at BMW Morristown, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all that good stuff. But I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to let the engines talk, so enjoy these revs and we'll see you in the next video.